Now let me start by saying this. Klay Thompson was reported about 40 minutes before the draft to have had a right lower leg injury. Most of you remember 2 finals ago, he suffered an ACL injury in his left knee, causing him to miss what was this past season. Now, my comment stands with or without him on the court. Now, moments ago in the draft, the Warriors used the 2nd overall pick to draft James Wiseman, but I'm not sold on him or the Golden State Warriors going into this next season to be A, championship contenders, or B, to have a deep playoff push. Now, Wiseman chose to enter the draft after only playing 3 college games. The last 2 7-footers I remember with any type of success that had this little experience walking into the NBA is Tyson Chandler and Kendrick Perkins, who came out of high school. They both have championships. So I'm not saying that Wiseman doesn't have an opportunity to establish some type of dominance while he's in the NBA, but I am saying that he will most definitely be a project. Here's the good. Wiseman is more athletic than the traditional back-to-the-basket big man. We'll use Nikola Jokic as an example. When playing Jokic, Wiseman has the advantage on his offensive end because he can put the ball on the ground. Now, I'm not looking for him to pull a bunch of dribble moves and pull up jumpers. All I'm saying is there is potential for him to pull a 1 or 2 step layup, if not get to the basket and dunk off of 1 dribble. On the defensive end, against a more traditional style center, he still has a slight advantage because he's more athletic. What do we know about athletic 7-footers? Typically, their wingspan is longer than the rest of their body. With more traditional back to the baskets, from today's league anyway, you don't see that as much. Their wingspan is typically their height, if not shorter. So there is positives to having Wiseman on your team, but there's also negatives. With just about no experience, Wiseman has come into an NBA that is transitioning the big man role yet again. 5 or 6 years ago, we might have been looking at a big man league ran by 6'8", maybe as tall as 6'10" individuals who didn't have much skill on the offensive end. They were supposed to run the court, protect the rim, make open layups when necessary, but most of them weren't necessarily jump shooters. Wiseman is now in the West against big men. Now, when I tell you he's in the West, I do not mean that from a team standpoint. I mean East versus West from the big man position talent pool. He'll have to go up against men like Memphis, Valanciunas, LaMarcus Aldridge with the Spurs, Hassan Whiteside with Portland. And I'm not saying all these guys are top tier big men. What I'm telling you is these are veterans, some of which can do it on both ends, but somebody like Hassan Whiteside, very good defensive player. He was lackluster in this playoffs. Still a very good defensive player. Kristaps Porzingis, 7'3" shooter in Dallas. Karl Anthony Towns in Minnesota. Rudy Gobert, another great defensive player, if I'm not mistaken. He's 2-time defensive player of the year. And Rudy Gobert coming out of Utah. Nikola Jokic, conference finals, the best player on his team. Lakers, Anthony Davis and Dwight Howard, not to mention JaVale McGee. If Dwight Howard and or JaVale McGee go to opposing teams in the West, we could be looking at anywhere between 10 to 12 or 13 big men that Wiseman would have to see throughout the year. And again, with just 3 games played in college, I could understand why he would have a poor rookie season. Now let me say this, I am not writing that young man off if he comes in and has a phenomenal, if he comes in and has a good rookie season, I'm on the bandwagon. I mean, those are some names to have to go up against throughout the entire season, more or less the playoffs. So if he comes in and has a good rookie season, I'm on the bandwagon, but I'm not jumping on yet. Why we're really sitting here is because I want to talk about the Golden State Warriors and understand something. I know that Klay Thompson could be out another year, if not potentially half a season, quarter of a season, and I will understand why their playoff chances would diminish. But what I'd like to say is, I don't care whether he's healthy or not. What have they done to really be championship contenders? Now, a lot of people with basketball common sense know that they're not championship contenders with or without a healthy Klay Thompson. But what I'm asking is, what makes you think that they're going to the second round of the playoffs? What makes you think that they could potentially go back to the conference finals? They did it 5 years straight when they were healthy. But we're talking about a completely different team. Now, for those of you that are fans of the Golden State Warriors, or you just kept up with them over the last, I will say about 8 or 9 years, what gave them their success? Honestly, it was the three-point shot and being able to utilize damn near every single man on the bench. With or without KD, we're talking about players like Leandro Barbosa, Matt Barnes, Andrew Bogut, Anderson Varejao was on the practice squad, DeMarcus Cousins, Sean Livingston, Andre Iguodala, Nick Young, David Lee, JaVale McGee, Zaza Pachulia. The list goes on for the number of players that they could call upon during the regular season and or playoffs. If you had one game, if you had one possession where you did your job, they were able to utilize you. Well, let's look back at it. The three-point shot. Now, again, Steph Curry revolutionized the league with the three-point shot, but now everybody's doing it. Now every team in the league is jacking up threes, half court. You got big men doing it. You've got your middlemen, your small forwards, your shooting guards, and you've got the smallest guy on the court, Dame Lillard, jacking up threes half court at a very high percentage. Now that you are not the deepest team in the league, what is your go-to? I forgot about Maurice Space, but for those of you upset that I gave those names, now I'm not saying by any way, shape, or form that those guys were pivotal to them winning the championship every single year or making those deep playoff runs to get to the championship. What I am saying was those were the worst men on the roster. Anderson Varejao was at one point in time a top 10 center in the NBA, potentially, maybe, depending on injury somewhere, he might have been a top 5 for like a season or maybe half a season or something like that. But what I'm telling you is he was on the practice squad. I don't ever remember him playing in one of those championship games. This is the worst on your roster. So it took a team. And again, with those three-point shots, I'm sorry, but everybody's doing it now. So you're going to have to come up with something new. So if I take away your bench, now what do you have? You're going to rely on Steph and Klay. When Steph sits down, you're going to rely on Klay to be the only offense. When Klay sits down, you're going to rely on Steph to be the only offense. Now, I understand one person that I have not brought up for good reason is Andrew Wiggins. I do believe he's a good player. I do believe he's better than half of the league. But I don't believe that he is the answer to the woes that the Golden State Warriors are about to go through. Now, for those of you that are so gung-ho over, oh, hey, Steph and Klay are going to be back in the same shape, same form that they were before the injuries because they're shooters. Now, mind you, one had an ACL injury and the other had a wrist injury. I believe that they can get back into their form. But, well, does that necessarily mean that their three-point shooting will trump everybody else's? No, it doesn't. Now, I understand the percentages that they shot at, but let's not forget Houston, for 2 years consecutive, had better three-point numbers than Golden State and lost to them twice. It was the depth that got Golden State over Houston. Now, I'm not saying that any statement that I have made here today is concrete. All I'm saying is, if you've got Golden State making a championship run, which most of you don't because you have common sense when it comes to not only basketball, but sports in general, if you've got them going to the second, maybe even the third round, hell, at this point, if you have them guaranteed in the playoffs, in the West, I mean, come on now. The Mavericks looked pretty damn good when they lost to the Clippers. The Clippers have improved. The Lakers are definitely going back to bare minimum the conference finals. Portland, okay, all right, they might miss. Greg Popovich, is he gonna miss the playoffs 2 years consecutive? So I'm Houston. They're gonna play together. They're not really gonna have much of a choice. I don't see them getting anything for James Harden or Russell Westbrook. Nobody really wants those contracts. So, with all staying the same as last year or something very similar to last year, I'm not guaranteeing Golden State the playoffs. The Suns, what about Memphis, Utah? The Nuggets will be back in the playoffs, bare minimum second round. So again, for those of you just irate and adamant about them making the second round of playoffs, if not the conference final, I need to know how. My argument is not sound because it's based off of a guy that played 3 college games, so we don't know how good or how bad he's going to look this season. But I do know one thing. I've made a very compelling argument. Are you drunk yet?